woman just gets her ass beat. And so I commented, not so tough without the IDF behind them shooting anyone who fights back. And of course, the comments, for the most part, it's funny. The comment has like 300 likes on it and shit like that. Like it's actually pretty nuts. By the way, we just dropped a new song called COVID Sauce. That is fantastic. But I've had several J's comment on my thing. And every single time, it's like just crybaby shit. And this one guy says, something about winning and blah, blah, blah. You think winning is all about war and guns or some shit like that. And so, of course, I just lit him up. And his response was like, ha, ha, ha. Do you see the videos of the destruction? And it's insane how these inbred fucking Nazi crazy ass motherfuckers get away with what they get away with. So I want you to check out something that I posted. So people always say like, what do you mean? It's not that bad. So this is the Talmud. These are quotes from the Talmud. I can't. It's weird how I can't see this. It won't let me do anything. It won't let me do this.
This is our wife, my daughter Welda, my daughter Doa.
It's Broly's birthday, apparently. Okay, so Solarim, number 15, says, even the best of Goyim should all be killed. Yebamoth, 98a, said, all children of Goyim are animals. Baba Miza, 114, says, I can't read it, there's something in the way. Gad Shaz 22 says, a J may violate but not marry a non-J. Gentile Goyim girls are in a state of nida, filth from birth. That's Aboda Zara 3 something. Sheridan 54b says a J may have sex with a child as long as the child is less than 9 years old. Sheridan 58b says if a goy hits a J, he must be killed. Man, I can't read these because there's something in the way. When a J murders a goy, there will be no penalty. I can't read these other two. If a J is lost an object, it's something about how if a goy loses something, they don't have to return it, but if a J loses it, then you have to return it. Eboda Zaraha 22a, 22b, Gentile goys prefer sex with cows. Baba Kama 113a, Jays may use lies to circumvent a goy, a Gentile. And these are just some of them. These are just some of the awful, awful things these pieces of shit believe. Here's a video that's... Look at this, watch this one.
No, we're not violent, yet you accuse us of being violent. I think that's pretty ironic. Hiding your face to give you it's like if you really thought we were violent, you would never be here. But you know we're not violent, because we're not. We're peaceful people.
Look at, it's amazing how many videos show men attacking women. they're always so tough when it's a woman. Isn't that funny? They just hit her. You don't want them to burn your babies next. You better go home. The best part about this is in New York, I believe. Videos filmed pro-Israeli mobs attacking pro-Palestinian activists as they protested the visit of Israeli war criminal Ben-Gvir in Brooklyn. Among them, a woman who was reportedly not a part of the protest. The mobs assaulted the woman, injuring her in the face, all under the watch of the NYPD, which did not intervene. That's the craziest part. The NYPD was all around watching these Jays attack Palestinian supporters, attack Americans, and they don't do anything because they don't want to get in trouble for arresting a Jay. You're sitting here like you can see it. Oh, I guess I should just show the video. Yeah, it's normal. She's just bleeding from her head. No biggie. While the cops, nothing. Look at him trying to block the camera. Ben-Gvir. And see, this is the point I keep making, is that it's not at all about Israel. Israel is just the manufactured house, the invisible house. It's just a bunch of fake lines drawn on the maps they provide us. And it's you know, the true enemy is the cult. Like all those attackers, those aren't Israelis. I mean, the guy in the comments was like, he's talking about, did you see the videos of the destruction? Like, haha, like he's celebrating all the videos that come out showing children being killed, bombs being dropped on tents. But again, it's not Israel. Israel is just this idea, this this distraction. Israel doesn't exist. It only exists because we say it exists. We accept it exists. But Israel isn't the problem. The cult is the problem. The cult that cuts and sucks baby penises. Of course, they're all violent, disgusting human beings. They've all been molested at 8 days old. They all get mutilated and molested by the moil while their family watches. You can't tell me there's not genetics. There's just endless videos showing the same thing. Destruction. Did you see the video of the guy in New York, the black guy that got pushed out of the chair? Out of his wheelchair? Did you see that one? Where the Jay came out and just got mad and pushed the black guy out of his wheelchair? Can you imagine if it was the other way around? If a black guy, a young black man, pushed an old Jay out of his wheelchair? Can you imagine all of the hate crime bullshit that would just be everywhere?
What's he breaking out from? Yeah.
We need to fucking wake up here, man. The crazy part is Like, are you silent because you think, well, it's just the Palestinians,
Right.
you know, I have nothing to do with them, this, that, and the other. Is that what you think? Because that's what it is right now. But what do you think's going to happen when they're done killing all the Palestinians and they're done killing the Lebanese and the Syrians and all the people that they want to over there?
I'll wait until this afternoon.
They're going to come for you.
You're welcome, Ray.
They are, we're talking about a psychopathic, murderous cult that just thinks the worst fucking things about us, about non-cult members. And it's just disgusting. And your boy Trump is you know, he's the number one puppet they have right now. And he just does, you know, you've seen the footage of him pulling out Netanyahu's chair. Like, people want to override that, but when have you ever seen Trump do that for anyone else? Women, dignitaries of any kind. When have you ever seen Trump pull out the chair for another person, especially in his country, in his White House or wherever it was? This is genocide, people. We're talking about genocide. And I just don't get it, man. I don't get the silence, you know. But you're seeing less and less of it. People are waking up. I was surprised my comment had, 300 likes on it. But you're seeing it everywhere, man. People are waking up to this idea that we're being lied to. And it's the same people that run the medical community that tell you you have cancer and you're depressed and you need the drugs that they supply you from, their pharmaceutical manufacturers. And like, it's just everywhere. And I think the people are waking up, all of the Tartaria people. If you're a Tartaria person and you really want to know the truth, well, then we Goyim have to unify and overthrow the Jays that control our narrative. If you want the truth, that's the only way we get it. But clearly, our history is a lie, and we all sort of say it, but then we don't go further with it and say, well, if it's a lie, who is telling that lie? Who are the liars providing the lie? And that's when you start to see it just across the board. It's the same narrative. You'll never see somebody come into my feed, Greenberg, Bergstein, Berg, Green, whatever, Feinstein, Berg, Fern, whatever. You'll never see any of them come in here and be like, hey, I think you have some misconceptions about us. We're not bad. Here, let me explain to you what you're getting wrong. You'll never see it. Their response to everything is that we shouldn't be saying it. That's it. That's the only thing they ever say, is that Goyim shouldn't be talking. Who are you to talk about us? Blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And it's just so appalling. They're such appalling, horrible people. They don't care about anyone else. The only thing they care about is that we're here to service them. And trust me, they're not going to kill everybody. They can't. They're not going to start fixing their own cars and serving their own food and all that. It's funny because, like, my wife was years ago was real big and like almost mad and embarrassed by me, She was like, you can't say these things about an entire group of people, and it, you have to sort of pull back. And I was like, no. And since then, I think her mind has changed a little bit. I mean, I'm sure she still believes that there are good ones out there and we shouldn't label an entire blah, blah, blah. But, one of the key arguments that we have is, I mean, she used to work at the Townsend Hotel. That we both did, actually. But the Townsend Hotel is like the most prestigious hotel in Michigan. It's the only 4-diamond hotel in Michigan. And it would be 5 if they had a swimming pool, but they don't have a swimming pool, blah, blah, blah. And one of the things that they would do is, they offered a banquet service. And so the Jays would rent out the banquet service at a discounted rate, and have their bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs, whatever kind of celebration they wanted to have. And my wife worked in the kitchen and in the banquet service arena. And so when the time would come for, the event to take place, we're talking about one of the most prestigious hotels in the country, at least in Michigan for sure. So the kitchen area was always like immaculately clean. It wasn't like a diner kitchen. It was immaculate. They cleaned that place every single day. After every single shift, they would have to scrub down the cutting boards and get all the nooks and crannies and all that. They would do that every day. Yet when a J event would take place, they would have to strip everything down and clean it again. And they'd have to wear gloves, and they'd have to, once it was cleaned, it couldn't be touched anymore. See, what they were doing wasn't cleaning the dirt off. They were cleaning the goyim off. They would have to clean us off of the cutting boards, the dishes, the whatever it was, the cooking utensils. And once it was cleaned and disinfected, it was off limits. And then they would have their own people come in, and they would make a huge mess of everything. They didn't give a fuck. They would cook and like it was, throwing shit around because they knew they didn't have to clean it afterward. But then during the banquet service, my wife, along with all of the rest of the servers, would have to stand against the wall silently. They weren't allowed to speak at all. Hands behind their back, like they were in a, military of some sort. And they would just have to wait. And if one of them walked up and said, go do this, they would have to do it. Go get me this, that, and the other. And instead of handing them stuff, you have to put it on the table. Can I have a spoon? Yes, here. You put the spoon on the table, then they pick up the spoon. You don't hand it directly to them. And this would happen all the time. And she said, there'd be times where she'd make eye contact with one of them, and they'd look at her, and they'd like brush something on the floor, just looking at her like, you're going to have to clean that up later. They would just be slobs. They would just destroy the place, knowing that nobody could say anything, nobody would say anything, and they didn't have to do any of the cleaning.
And then the part was we had to empty all our coolers out and find places for all the food and the racks and shit, just so they could have, whatever space they wanted, and it wouldn't be touching any of the shit that we had in there.
Which is I mean, it's
walk-in coolers and walk-in freezer, like.
It's as racist, supremacist as you can imagine. Our food can't touch your food. Not like worrying about, cross-contamination or some shit.
Oh, no.
A can of peas can't be sitting next to a can of their peas. That is fucking awful. And this is just acceptable behavior all over the country, and it wouldn't be in any other way. If I had an event or something like that, and I was like, hey, I don't want any J's in the kitchen. I don't want any J's, working or servicing us. I don't want any, you got to clean the J off. That wouldn't be acceptable. Understand that Donald Trump hates America and he is destroying the First Amendment to accommodate Israel, to accommodate them. It's when the First Amendment is the right, the free speech, the right to protest, the right to assemble, uh, free press, and the right to redress your grievances with your government. And for Trump to make it illegal for people, for college campuses to cut off the funding to Harvard, like it's one of those
They
things where it's like,
removed their tax exempt status. That's worse than cutting off funding. So now they have to pay taxes on all that tuition they collect. That's far more money than the government funding they were getting.
cum say cum sa, I guess, in that regard.
It's a lot. That's a big one.
But it's so fascinating that strictly because the school refuses to punish kids for exercising their First Amendment right.
Which that's what college is about.
Right. Especially a place like Harvard. And the thing is, if it's happening at Harvard, where the rich and powerful go, and Harvard is like the Cadillac of schools, right? Harvard is the Kleenex of college. Harvard is the jacuzzi of schools, where it's that name brand. It's not, jacuzzis are actually, that's a name brand. They're hot tubs, but we call them jacuzzis because that word. Kleenex are just tissues, but we call them Kleenex because that's just how Harvard is that.
And that in itself is a total deception, because I can guarantee you that those teachers don't have a magic formula that makes them teach the students any better or any differently than Columbia.
Well, I would imagine it's because a lot of them are J teachers.
U of M or whatever. Like, it's not.
It's prestige. It's name.
It's just the name.
Right. You're buying the name, which that name will get you in more doors. But to think like Schoolcraft College is the local college, the local nothing college that has really great programs and stuff like that. It's a great school.
Oakland Community College is among the best community colleges in the nation.
Right. So to think that it can happen to Harvard, what do you think? And Harvard can't do anything about it. What do you think's going to happen when it happens to Schoolcraft or Oakland Community College or something like that? What do you think they're going to do? And how come all of the rich and powerful parents, because it's the rich and the powerful, the famous, that can afford to send their kids to Harvard. As badly as my kids wanted to go to Harvard, they never would. They could get the best grades possible, and they would never go to Harvard. They could get A pluses and everything from here on out. They're not going to get a scholarship to Harvard. The only people sending their kids to Harvard are the most powerful, richest people in the world. By the way, if you're commenting on here and wondering why I'm not saying anything, it's because I can't see the comments. No comments are coming through. Isn't that just a weird coincidence? Isn't that just another weird coincidence? That for some reason the comments aren't coming through, which essentially makes you think I'm ignoring you, so you're less likely to sub, share, like the video, as you should. You should be liking, you should be subbing, you should be sharing. There are 25 people on here. Do I think 25 people are J's? No. And if you're not a J, I can't imagine why you don't support what's being said here. Are you really dumb enough to think that they give a shit about you? You know what I always found interesting? Whenever there'd be like a fake event, the synagogue shootings or whatever, those fake ass orchestrated events, they would parade black people around and be like, these are our brothers and sisters, and we all need to stand up for our J brothers and sisters, blah, blah, blah. Yet when it's George Floyd or a black guy, you don't see any goofy penguins out there talking about, Stop. Like, I remember the video when the George Floyd protests were happening here in Detroit. And they were showing that there was like, at one point, there was a line where on one side of the line were the protesters yelling and throwing railroad spikes because apparently they were just getting railroad spikes from someplace because, railroad spikes are just readily available. But you wouldn't see any of them. They would just keep telling us that that was happening. But you'd see on one side the black and white, mostly white actually, people out, not mostly, half white, people out there yelling and protesting, and on the other side you saw the cops, and the cops are in full body armor. They got all their weapons. They would stand there with their shields and their batons and bang them in unison. Like basically like come at. That's enticement. They're enticing people to come at me. And I remember just thinking, imagine if on the protest side there were a bunch of goofy Jays in their little penguin suits at the front of the line. Do you really think the cops would attack them like they did without the Jays? No. Show me. Show me a video of cops attacking Jays. I remember during COVID, there was the only community that was threatened to be locked down was this one Jay community. And they formed, I can't remember what, it was one of their holidays. And they were mad because it might have, I don't know. But it was one of their holidays. And in protest, they would throw their masks in the street. Yeah, so this is going to be fun, huh? Now they're with my feed. You would see these videos of all of these goofy penguins yelling in the police's face, yelling at them, daring them to do something, and they did nothing. Just like that video I showed you. Those were, the protesting in New York over Ben Gvir being there, Itmar Ben Gvir, who is a war criminal, who has actually been, done time, supposedly, for inciting violence against Arabs. He is as big a piece of shit as there's ever been. Him, Netanyahu, and Bezalel Smotrich. These are just horrible, disgusting, savage, supremacist assholes. And they would, and the idea that they can come here. Like there was another video from the other day. Ben Gvir loves to walk down the middle of streets, stopping traffic and doing all that to show his power. He loves to walk down the middle of the street and just, show off. And he tried to do that in New York, and people came out of the woodwork yelling at him, "Get the fuck out of here, war criminal, blah, blah, blah." To the point where they had to pull a car up and get him the fuck out of there because it was turning into a scene. And he's walking around down, he's violating the law by walking down the street to begin with. But he has police protection. Our tax dollars are protecting this piece of shit while he just does what he wants to do. I mean, what are you even holding on to? Obviously, you can't comment because nobody can, apparently. Interestingly, my comments have been shut down. But, like, what does it take for you to see this truth? Morning, Buster.
Morning, Bubba.
Nice of you to finally get up. Hang on. You know what? That's who I'm fighting for. Because I believe my children are in danger. As long as this cult is allowed to exist, all of our children are in danger. All of the Goyim population are in danger. Because they're psychopaths. They're fucking psychopaths. And unless you understand that, you're being duped. It really is that simple. You know, they are lying. It's all just a bunch of lies. I mean, think about it. Like, we give Israel $3.8 billion a year as a base. That's like the base amount that they're guaranteed every year, thanks to the memorandum of understanding that is signed every 10 years. Obama signed the last one, and Trump will sign the next one. Obama signed the last one, but then it didn't like go into effect. It's a really weird thing. For some strange reason, Obama signed the last one in 2016 or no 15, but it didn't go into effect until 2018. So that 10 years later, when the next one is signed, it'll be 2028 when Trump's last year. Now, when they sign this last memorandum of understanding, look it up. Tell me I'm wrong. Look up memorandum of understanding. When they signed the last one for $38 billion over 10 years, originally it had two, quote, concessions in it. Netanyahu had to agree to concede to two stipulations. Those stipulations being that Israel wasn't allowed to ask for more money until that 10 years was up, and that they had to use that money that we give them to buy weapons from us, because you know they're trying to pull a ruse off. They're trying to trick the people into thinking that Israel is one of our best customers and they buy weapons from us and shit like that. But then by the time it went into effect in 2018, 19, I'm not even sure how it all worked. Because I'm not saying I'm not sure because I didn't look. I'm saying I'm not sure because it's a really wonky situation. It's just weird. But when it was then put into practice, those two concessions were gone. And instead, it said that the United States would now leave a large cache of weapons in Israel for emergency use. But if Israel needed to use those weapons, they could, and we would replenish them and all that. And the thing is, they were mad about $38 billion over 10 years. They thought they should get closer to $100 billion over 10 years. And I can almost guarantee you that in 2028, when Trump re-signs the memorandum of understanding, if it's even publicized, they will get the $100 million that they wanted. 100 billion. Now, I know a lot of people don't really get the difference between a million and a billion. And this is the best way I've figured out to describe it, or heard to describe it. So a million seconds is roughly 12 days. It's a little less than 12 days. A billion seconds is 125 fucking years. That's the difference between a million and a billion. Israel only has 9-10 million people in it. So when you think that 9 or 10 million people is given 125 years worth of seconds money every single year, at the lowest end, this is the lowest level, right? I mean, they get all sorts of other monies, and you know, like every time you hear there's this new thing, Trump is bragging about $6 billion or whatever it is worth of weapons being sold to Israel. Well, that's not necessarily true, because not only do we give them the $3.8 billion a year, that since there's no longer a concession, a stipulation that they use that money to buy weapons from us, we're just giving them the cash. They can do whatever they want with it now. There are also a bunch of grants put aside, a whole bunch of different grants put aside, that whenever they do the, buying weapons, it's the grants that end up paying for the weapons. So they don't pay for shit. We do. American tax dollars are taken in droves, like taken in ways that you can't even imagine, and given to a first world country that is committing genocide, that uses that money to commit genocide. The Israeli population is a bunch of people, like, everybody gets mad. Oh, all these people on welfare, blah, 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 blah. It's nothing compared to them. They get their checks every month. They all get their checks every month from the government. They get their house, their mansion. When you hear the word settlement and settlers, I know in my head I think a settlement, it's wooden shacks and shit. It's a settlement. It's it can't be that nice. No. It's like a really nice neighborhood where all of the houses are huge and have, fences around them, and they're compounds. I mean, you haven't heard Israel even a little bit complain that they have a situation where, too many people have come in and they don't know what to do to house them or job them or whatever, because they don't have to. They just come there, they're given their house, their spread, and then they're given their check every month. 10 million people get $3.8 billion, which is, once it converts, it's about 15 billion shekels every year. If you just look at it from the minutes and seconds position, so roughly 11 day or 12 days, 12 days times 9 is 80. What's 12 times 9? 83. 12 times 9? No, 108. Yeah, 108. So 108 days is given $4 billion, 500 years worth of money every year. 500 years worth of money is given to 108 days worth of people. Did you not get that? Like, I try to put it into perspective. I know it can be a little confusing because there's no real way to like make it make sense. We as people can't fathom what a billion is. Forever, they didn't even use the term billion. They would say 1,000 millions. A billion was this laughable concept, and a trillion is just, it's like 3,000 some years or something like that. But it's like, have you seen anything to the contrary? Have you seen any videos, anything that exists that shows Israel in any sort of peril, or the Israelis helping or being good or anything like that? Can you think about it? I mean, it shouldn't even be like it shouldn't be this way. Everybody should be like, oh no, there's this video or there's that video or they've helped out this but you can't. There's literally nothing good that comes out of there. Well, they're leading the world in vaccine production. Oh, well, there you go. That helps us out a whole bunch, doesn't it? You guys ready for the next round of COVID? They're going to bring it back. You're going to get COVID sauce all over. And I highly suggest, again, you go check out our new tune, COVID Sauce. The link for the video will be in the description. You know, I mean, I don't like people. Well, what are you doing? Well, what can I do? What do you think? I'm going to put on a red bandana, have a helicopter drop me, drop me with a parachute. I'm going to have a knife on me, some grenades, and a big gun, and I'm just going to Rambo my way through it? No. No. What it takes is for all of us goyim to realize that the differences they've created between us, that these negatives that are supposed to exist, are there just for that, just so we have something to focus on and hate each other over. Because they don't do that, they don't do that. They're this well-oiled machine that works together. But as long as they have us completely distracted and fighting over skin color, fighting over sexual preference, fighting over sexual identity, any of that shit.
Okay, great. Now, I found some additional remodel injuries. This time to the sternum and lower ribs, more recent than from the fight with the producer.
It's how they operate. It's their way of doing this is to, make us hate each other, make us focus on bullshit, so that we're not talking about the real issue here. When you're sitting there crying about Trump renaming the Gulf of Mexico, or Trump's going to take over Greenland, or some bullshit, or you're distracted by, Katy Perry went to space and the patch that they use is an upside down Baphomet and shit like that. That's what you're supposed to be doing. They put that stuff out there so we focus on it. It's not an accident that the door was opened early on the capsule. No, they did that on purpose so we would have something to focus on, because they could just make it disappear too. But while that's Israel is continuing to commit genocide and you're not paying attention. One of the videos that you should look at that's really, really powerful, and my wife said this one affected her too, was when you look at the before and afters of Gaza. Because I think a lot of you, when you think about Gaza, you think it's like this desert wasteland, and again, people in tents and people like, in settlements and little shanties and shit like that. No. It was a fucking bustling, modernized city. Buildings everywhere and beautiful. It was a beautiful place. And then you look at the after and you just see the destruction that's been brought. And it's all your fault. Your American tax dollars. You work hard so they can take your money and give it to Israel. And the thing is, the Americans give, roughly $4 billion, $3.8 billion a year, but that's just the Americans. The Canadians give $2 billion, Australia gives $1.2 billion, and there's just, I don't know all of them. Sorry, I don't know all of them. But, think about how much money Germany's on the hook for every year. Think about all of this money being funneled into Israel.
Them as much as we do.
No, nobody gives them as much as we do. That's for sure. But nobody's that big. Russia would be the only one big enough to sort of, to compete. But it's just insane. It just doesn't make sense. And the fact is, you're not going to find anywhere where you're going to see a video of me or someone like me in a round table discussion and in a position to where I'm allowed to say these things, and then one of them tells me what I'm wrong about. You're never going to see that video because they just won't let it exist, because they can't. They can't do that. They can't make any reasonable arguments to justify the stealing of our money, the genocide, the sexual assaults. When you look at the Hollywood pedo situation, who's always the fucking guilty ones? Guys like Dan Schneider, Dan Schneider was a horrible, horrible human being who now as an old man has said, "Oh, I want to apologize, sincerely apologize to anybody who I didn't realize I was doing anything wrong, but if anybody felt like I was doing something wrong, then I want to sincerely apologize." Bullshit. Bullshit. You know that Weinstein, when he had a Goyim judge and everything was real publicized, Weinstein was given 25 years and, blah, blah, blah. But the appeal was handled by a J judge and it was overturned. I mean, it's so disgusting how brazen and obvious they are with everything. Challenging you, daring you to say something, but then if you do, they throw the term anti-Semitism at you. You're anti-Semitic. Well, again, it's a manipulation. So when they say you're anti-Semitic, you should be upset. You should say, fuck you, I'm not racist. Semitism or Semitic refers to all of the people of that region. Whether it's the Palestinians or it's the Syrians or the Yemeni or the Houthis or the Egyptians or any of that shit. You have Kirk, what's his name? They all look the same. Tucker Carlson, all those guys. But what's Kirk's first name?
Captain.
I forget what his name. But you have people like that who I forgot my point. I forgot it. But I mean, it's who used that term Semitic? That's anti-Semitic, anti-Semitic. They throw this around because they know you're too stupid to understand what's being said, and you should be, adamantly, vehemently, fucking like, hell no, I'm not anti-Semitic. I love the Palestinian people. I love the Egyptians, the black people. Black people are Semitic people as well. That's what Kanye was saying and got in so much trouble. But Semitism means policy or predisposition favorable to Jays. At the very least, can somebody at least explain why they should get favoritism when it comes to policy and predisposition? Policy, rules, regulations, the way things work. And then predisposition is how you go into it. Before you know any of the details, you go into it thinking, well, they're going to get favoritism. Why should they? What have they done to warrant favoritism for anything? Aren't we all supposed to be equal here? Aren't we all people and equal, and who gives a shit what your fake ass, spiritual narrative is? That's why they've made such a big deal about religion, Christianity and all that. They had to do that. Because if they make Christianity such a big deal, such a protected thing, protect our religious freedoms and shit, it's then can be used to their advantage. Now remember, you Christians, they've tricked you into thinking that the bad guys in your Bible, and actually, if you actually look, your Bible is a J narrative. All of the characters are J's. All of the stories are J stories. It's not about Christians, it's about J's. But the bad guys in your Bible, it's not Satan. The people that killed your superhero, your Christian God's only son, they are Christian God's favorite chosen people? How do you not see that as being like a total red flag? They've given you this religion, this fundamental aspect of your person. They gave this to you, and you willingly accept the position of being second class. You are the second class. You are the lower class. They are superior to you based on just the belief itself. Why would you ever believe such nonsense? We have 3 likes. Again, I'm sorry I can't see your comments. It's just not letting me. They're just not showing up. It says, welcome to the live chat. Remember to guard your privacy and abide by our community guidelines. That's the only thing that's there. I'm sure there are plenty of comments here. I just can't see them. So if you agree with any of this, like this video, share this video, subscribe. Stand up for us. It's us versus them. Look, over and over. Look at this. They keep fucking with my feed. I live in fucking Redford. I'm right outside of Detroit. There are cell phone towers all around me, and it's flat. I'm also in a house surrounded by aluminum siding, so it's one big antenna. Why would this be? My view count just went from 33 down to 10. That happened. That's how this works. That's how live feeds work, right? I went from 33 views and 4 likes down to 10 views and 2 likes, just like that. How does that make sense? You know, when do you guys realize like they've tricked us into hating each other? COVID did a great job of that, getting you to hate your brothers and sisters. You know, they put all this shit out. Like how many of you would honestly, all of you gay haters out there, what if it was your kid? What, are you really going to turn your back on your kid because they happen to be born a certain way? Really? That's you? You're that kind of piece of shit? You know, you have guys like Stu Peters who are saying the right things mixed in with a bunch of bigotry and hatred and all that shit. Because that's how that works. They have to let some of their characters say the right things. Right? Because you would say, Jesus, nobody, there's not a single person on TV that sees something wrong with this. There's not a single person in that position that sees something wrong. They can't let that happen. It would be too obvious. So what do? They have guys like Stu Peters say a lot of the right things while still pushing the hatred. You ever wonder why guys like Anomaly are allowed to have, when I saw it a couple of years ago, he had 2.3 million followers on Facebook. He's supposedly telling all these secrets, right? Why is he allowed to have such a huge following if he's telling all these secrets? Well, at the end of the day, he tells you to believe in God and Jesus. And as long as you believe in God and Jesus, they have you. You're within the realm. But it truly, anytime you talk to Christians, you know, it's obvious they don't know their fucking narrative. They don't know what their shit says. They might have heard, you know, somebody say something or quote something or whatever it is, but they don't fucking know. They know nothing. It's embarrassing. Every time I have a Christian come on the feed and I'm allowed to see the comments, it's like it's a joke. You know, it's embarrassing to see how inept and how ignorant they are to their own shit. I mean, it's all there. You know, it's all right there in front of you. All you have to do is look, but you've been told you're not allowed to look. If you look and then happen to see something, you're not supposed to say anything. You're not supposed to get an answer to that question. You're just supposed to shut the fuck up. Shut up, dumb goyim. Shut up. Don't you ask those questions. Don't you ask why America First, Donald Trump, who you know, thinks we should cut every other country off and tariffs, you know, all these tariffs and all this bullshit. Who do you think that's going to benefit? All of you people who are barely surviving, living check to check out there, do you really think that raising the cost on the goods or just not having those goods available is going to benefit you in your life? I mean, it's insane. Trump's first 100 days just passed, and they're saying it's the worst 100 days in history. And then you have Trump saying, oh, it's the best one. A lot of people are saying that. A lot of people. Like, he says the same stupid shit over and over again. And then they give you the fake bullshit debates. Oh, the debate where the person he's debating doesn't point out any of the obvious shit. And of course, nobody brings up Katie Johnson. You know, why isn't anybody bringing up Katie Johnson? The 13-year-old girl who Trump and Epstein raped multiple times, who filed charges, and they actually went, like, the charges went through. They were indicted. There are court documents where Trump is the defendant. And yet she had to withdraw because the harassment was just too much. She was getting far too harassed. Like, I know what's done to me. If I wasn't such a thick-skinned, stubborn motherfucker, it would be a lot. My wife hates it. You know? She's gotten a thick skin over the years, but she still hates it. Imagine if you weren't a me and you were just a victim. You had already been victimized. And now you're being attacked. Your family's being attacked. All these different things are happening. She withdrew from the trial. She withdrew from it, not because it was found that she was wrong or that this was a frivolous lawsuit or anything. It's because she couldn't handle it. And this was in June of 2020. Ask yourself what was happening in June of 2020. Do you remember the news talking about Trump? Being indicted or having these charges filed against him? Do you remember that? No. Why? Because the only thing the news wanted to talk about at that time was COVID. I used to watch the news every day. I used to wake up at 5:30 so I could watch the overnight news's replay, and then I would watch channel 62. I would watch CBS. And then I would watch CBS This Morning with that Haffey broad, where they would do the half hour and then they would replay the half hour for some reason at 6:30. And then from 7 to 9, they would do the CBS This Morning with Gayle King and Norah O'Donnell and whoever gives a fuck. I don't care. And I used to watch that shit every day just so I could be informed, just so I could know what they wanted us to know. Didn't think it was the truth. I just wanted to know what they wanted us to know, what you think. And then I would watch the 700 Club from 9 to 10. Just because, again, I mean, it only really paid off in one instance. The Tuesday after Kobe died. Sunday, Kobe died. Monday, that's all the news was talking about. Tuesday, that's all the news was talking about. Then the Wednesday was the day that the Trump impeachment, one of the impeachment bullshits, was scheduled to end. So then Wednesday, they flipped over and started talking about that. Well, what happened on that Tuesday is now being put into place. Now, Trump signed the legislation back then with Netanyahu, who was also under indictment, standing behind him with his hand on his shoulder, saying that all colleges and universities had to have a pro-Israel curriculum and had to actively remove any BDS or anti-Israel sentiment on the campus at the risk of losing federal funding. And I always thought it was interesting, like, why would they have signed that and then it sort of disappeared? It never came into existence. Now it makes sense. They used the Biden, like, I always think that they brought Trump in early. I don't think they meant to have Trump be president when he was, but they needed to because Me Too was getting too strong. There were protests literally everywhere. Do you guys remember 2019? Do you guys remember how there were protests literally everywhere? The yellow vest movement all across Europe. The civilians in Hong Kong and China were protesting against the government, begging Americans for help. The South Americans were protesting. The Australians were protesting. The only ones not openly protesting their government was the United States. But Me Too was a big thing, and Black Lives Matter was a big thing. Like they were teetering on the brink. And so they brought Trump in 2016, what I believe to be 4 years early, just to quell things, just because, they needed to. And the thing is, the part that Trump supporters, Trumpansies, maggots love to avoid or ignore is that Trump lost the first election by 2.7 million votes. 2,700,000 plus more people voted for Hillary than for Trump. And that swamp that Trump was going to drain, the one that's full of J's, overrode that and put him in anyway. And people say, oh, this dumbass doesn't know how the Electoral College works. Yeah, I know the Electoral College only did this 3 times in modern history. The 2 times George Bush Jr. won, and the first time Trump won. Every other election, well, the Electoral College has agreed with the people. But this time, but in 2016, first of all, the voter turnout was much less than you think it was. So 2.7 million more votes going to Hillary is even bigger than you think it is. But they needed Trump in there because we were coming. The people were rising up. And it was happening all over the world. The women, like, how does Me Too go away? The strangest part about Me Too and all the detractors is that let it be your mother or your sister or whatever that's being violated. And you're the first to step up and want to, I'm going to fight you now. You disrespected my sister. You disrespected my mama. Think about Kavanaugh. How they put Kavanaugh in office, and then berated the woman that had the legitimate, just one of the people. You know what Blasey Ford? Do you know what her purpose was? Because her father was CIA, her brother was CIA. It's pretty obvious that she was a part of a plan. Well, if you remember correctly, there were actually 3 accusers. Blasey Ford was just the blonde, blue-eyed, prettier one that was paraded in front of us. But there was another one called Julie Swetnick. And if you look up Julie Swetnick, what Julie Swetnick described was your typical, because Kavanaugh was a Yalesman, a skull and bonesman. Nobody wanted to talk about that part. Just like J.D. Vance is a skull and bonesman. They might not talk about it, but that motherfucker went to Yale, didn't he? And I'm not saying all Yale people are skull and bones, but all Yale people who get to be in a super high position like that, skull and bones. But Julie Swetnick described the rape parties that Yale and Skull and Bones are famous for. And if that would have been the only one, that would have been really hard for them to override. But, Blasey Ford, she had said something a year prior too. She had written a letter a year prior. Nobody did anything about it. Nobody cared about what she was doing until they needed to. And then suddenly she's the big, and we're having these hearings. These aren't trials. And he's pulling out calendars, and this is my calendar. If it wasn't written down on my calendar, I didn't do it. Because he would have wrote down raped a girl on his calendar, right? And because she couldn't remember exactly what clothes she was wearing, well, that means she's lying. What clothes she was wearing 30 years ago. There was after the whole thing had passed, then the news wanted to interview Kavanaugh's old roommate, who absolutely destroyed his entire testimony. But this was after the fact, and it just went away. So Kavanaugh is an absolute piece of shit. They all are absolute total pieces of shit. It's a small club, and you ain't in it. J.D. Bowman, that's his real name, Bowman. Funny how they changed that up because they didn't want people fucking making that connection. The surname Bowman is now associated with pedophiles. And they couldn't have that happen, could they? How many of you watch and think that look, put it this way. If you don't think pedophiles should get the pass, or if you think pedophiles should be killed, then like the video. If you don't think so, then dislike the video. I don't care. But how many regular, normal, American, whatever, believe that pedophiles shouldn't be killed? Killed. No second chances. No, oh, well, this happened to me when I was a kid. Well, if it happened to you and you did it to somebody else, even more of a reason to kill you. You should not exist. But they can't do that. Why do all the pedophile laws need to be changed in the first place? Who wrote the laws to begin with that they need to be changed? And it just so happens that California has the least restrictions and the statute of limitations and all that. It favors the pedos the most in California, where Hollywood is. I'm sure that's just a coincidence, right?
Not even close. You can't even paint an argument for that to be a coincidence.
Right.
I bet you New York's a close second.
And Florida, a close third.
Well, we have Utah in there.
But
Mormons, they like to fuck little girls.
Right. But it's like we all know it. None of you would let your kid go to Hollywood, without you protecting, especially if they were a young kid. We all know that Hollywood is where they like to rape children.
Oh, Michael Jackson likes my kid? Yeah, he could go stay there for a weekend without me. What the fuck is wrong
Why
with
isn't that parent put in prison?
That parent should be put in prison. 100%.
But you never even hear about the parents. And the thing is, back in 2019, again, what you don't remember is that in the early stages of 2019, that was when Fleeing Neverland appeared out of nowhere. And everybody had an opinion on Fleeing Neverland. And everybody, it was all over the news. It was all over everywhere. They were, this dead guy, this dead guy. Let's besmirch this dead guy. And I'm going, yeah, but what about the people that are alive? What about the people, the Weinsteins and the Epsteins and the Terry Richardsons and the Dan Schneider? What about all these people who are alive who do horrible things? I mean, the Epstein thing, the reason why they had to shut Epstein down is because Epstein is a character. The Epstein character was a continuation of the Maxwell character. And Ghislaine Maxwell was the handler. She was the big dog in that situation. You think Epstein was because you're supposed to. But when you look into the history of Epstein and then the connection to Maxwell and the Maxwell fortune, the $500 million fortune that just disappeared, and then happened to be the exact same amount of money Epstein had. Epstein was a high-ranking Israeli operative, just like Maxwell's dad, Robert Maxwell. Israel wouldn't exist without Robert Maxwell.
Jizzy's dad.
Yep.
Call her Jizz. It's very
Good old Jizz Lane.
Just Jizz. She dealt in Jizz.
But how many of you know that William Barr was the attorney general at the time. He was like Trump's third attorney general or some shit. What?
What? Yeah.
He was the attorney general at the time. And he's the one that made the decision not to do a full-on investigation into the Epstein death. Well, how many of you understand that he should have recused himself? He should have had nothing to do with it because he had obviously an extensive relationship with Epstein prior to. And it was William Barr's father that gave Epstein his first real job at the Dalton Academy, being a teacher of the Dalton Academy is this prestigious school. And funny how they do this shit. They throw this stuff in here to make fun of us, you know. But William Barr's father was the headmaster of the Dalton Academy. And just before he left and went into the private sector to make $1 billion, he was his last duty, the last thing he did as that headmaster was give Epstein the teacher job when Epstein didn't even have all the credits. He hadn't finished school yet. So what about Epstein would make you go, oh yeah, let's put this dude in charge of a bunch of he doesn't even have the fucking credentials to do it. Are you telling me there's no one else that had better credentials and actually had the credentials to be the teacher that could have been put in place? So it was William Barr's father who started the Epstein train. And then it was William Barr who ended it? That's just a coincidence again, I'm sure, right? Go ahead, tell me what I'm wrong about. And then you look at the whole Robert Maxwell thing. Robert Maxwell is a guy who had like 5 different identities throughout his life. And of course, he grew up in the J ghettos where they were so poor, him and his sister had to share a pair of shoes. But you can't validate any of that because all of his family were killed in the Holocaust. He was the only one that survived. And then he slowly climbed his way up the rankings to the point where he was one of the top media moguls in Europe at the time. He was a British citizen. He was a UK citizen. Again, I'm not sure which one. I know the UK, or I don't know all those particulars. I'm sorry, but he was a citizen of the UK, and he was a media mogul. He was in charge. He had so much power, and in 1967, he smuggled a bunch of airplane parts into Israel so that they had the superior air force, which they used to maintain their supremacy. But then he also was caught selling American corporations and American schools and governments and all that an Israeli software package, kind of like Project Pegasus that exists now. But this was the precursor to that, only to find out that software package gave Israel a backdoor into anybody's computer system that uploaded it. And when Maxwell was supposedly killed, Israel gave him the highest ranking military funeral that anyone can get, with multiple prime ministers and high ranking generals and all that shit, all there and speaking on his behalf, with one of the prime ministers saying at the time, we cannot say here today everything that this man has done for Israel. Because again, it's sort of a, but why would Robert Maxwell, a British citizen, be given the highest ranking Israeli military funeral if he wasn't a fucking operative? I can't see the comments, but I'm sure all of you can. Are you seeing any comments that debunk anything I'm saying? Or are you just seeing a bunch of comments of crybabies telling me I shouldn't say these things? Talking shit about my hair or my beard or my ceiling or whatever bullshit they can talk about. It's called ad hominem. And ad hominem is what is used when you can't argue something. So you start focusing on different parts of the person, their beard, their hair, whatever it is, and then and use that as a way to say what they're saying is wrong because look at his haircut. Without ever having to actually focus on the details, you paint this picture of me as being wrong. This is how they operate. If anybody can show me the video that intelligently defends anything Israel, I'd love to hear it. I'd love to see it. I'm only going to tell you to watch. You have to watch one video. I think it's a good idea to watch everything. I just keep everything, keep it in mind that everything you can find, whether it's loose change or it's the Obama deception or anything like that, they allow it to be there. If they didn't allow it to have the hundreds of thousands, millions of views it has, it wouldn't. They would just shut it down. If it didn't say what they want said, if it didn't lead you in directions like Zeitgeist leads you in directions, but all of them are away from Israel, are away from the Jays. So they want you looking at these things. They want you understanding, it was a controlled demolition on 9/11. Do you guys understand that all of the focus that's on 9/11 is about the towers and then Tower 7 falling? Well, how did Tower 7 fall if it wasn't hit by a plane? Tower 7, the Twin Towers, blah, 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 blah. The real story on 9/11 is the Pentagon. But they don't want you knowing that. They don't want you talking about that. The Pentagon is the real fucking what the fuck story. Especially the idea that the giant 747 fit into a fucking tiny ass little hole that could only be made by a missile, especially the way it went through the different layers of the Pentagon. And it just also happened to hit in the exact spot where the investigation into the $2.3 trillion that Rumsfeld went on TV on September 10th, the night before. Rumsfeld went on TV saying that they couldn't find $2.3 trillion. It had been lost. And it just so happens that the one place on the Pentagon that was hit was the place housing the investigation into that $2.3 trillion. This is the Pentagon should have never been hit. Nothing should have even gotten close to the Pentagon. It's a G.I. Joe fortress. It's the largest military base in the world. It's the badass place. And there are turrets, there are guns, there are rockets, there are all sorts of hidden defense mechanisms all the way around that motherfucker. And of course, everything about the flights and all, it's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. It's all Mossad stuff. How many people, look up the dancing Israelis, right? If you look up dancing Israelis, you'll see a Snopes article. Is it true, the dancing Israelis? And it'll say partly false or something like that. Because they can't fully deny it. A group of Israelis was seen was reported. A woman called the police and said, there's a group of Arabic looking men who had set up a tripod and a camera and filmed the first plane hitting and then danced and had a good time. And then filmed the second plane hitting and danced and had a good time. And she called multiple times, but after the second phone call, the police showed up, they arrested them, they were taken in, and eventually they were flown home. It was found out they were Mossad agents. They were flown home, where they went on TV and laughed about the whole thing. It's like there's no falsehood here. It's what exactly happened. There are multiple reports of Israelis or Jays scouting all of these different buildings, taking pictures with a lighter, themselves, and then the lighter is in front of in between the picture and the building. There's so much evidence to show you that Israel did 9/11. And of course, you're supposed to think it's 19 Arabic hijackers who, half of them were found to be alive after the fact, and whose passports flew out of the huge explosion and landed on the street untouched. Of all the things to find after the huge explosion and then the towers falling into dust, all the metal, all the concrete, everything. Why do you suppose that keeps happening to my feed? Why do you suppose they keep fucking with my feed? They want you to get frustrated and leave. That's why they're not letting me see your comments so then I can respond to them, because they want you to get frustrated and leave. If anybody can tell me, what I'm getting wrong, why I'm wrong for any of this, I'd love to hear it. I mean, I've already personally experienced how disgusting these people are. I've had personally people saying to me, have you seen the destruction videos? Ha 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 ha, LOL, If you go look, you can find multiple videos of Israelis either renting boats or and going, in the water, or just having big parties where they watch as bombs are being dropped on civilians. After they've already destroyed and dropped bombs on and destroyed all their buildings, the citizens of Gaza have set up tent cities, and they're dropping bombs on the tents. But you can see all these videos of Israelis having big watch parties, and every time a bomb gets dropped, they celebrate. Yay! There's an endless stream of evidence out there showing you what the real issue is. There's not a single piece of evidence showing you Israel being victimized or, Jays being attacked or anything like that. It just doesn't exist. It's 2025. Anytime you're claiming one major event or another, understand that there's going to be multiple cameras, multiple videos of that thing happening. So you see all these Ben Gavirs and these Netanyahus claiming that Israel's the victim and all that. Show me one fucking video that makes Israel look like they're being victimized. I really wish I could talk to Jake Shields, but then again, I just can't help it. I can't help but ask, why is Jake Shields allowed to exist in such perpetuity? Why is he allowed to say these things? And again, because there has to be some, but at the end of the day, he's pushing the narrative of Israel. Everybody pushes the narrative of Israel is the bad guy. Israel is the bad guy. I'm not anti, I will not say. No. Every single person that criticizes always has to be like, oh, well, I'm against the Zionists. Free Palestine, Zionists, Israel, these are all ideas that we were allowed to talk about. Because they allow us to vent our frustrations in a in a deceptive sort of way, in a way that doesn't really address the problem. Because the problem is the cult. Mititza bitpa, which is the practice of sucking on the baby penis after they circumcise it. I hate them, and they do that to their own people. But I still think that's wrong. We shouldn't. Why should we accommodate such horrible, horrible, disgusting behavior? And every time I bring it up to any of them, they just ignore it. They don't want to talk about that. They can't. They can't talk about the mikvahs, which are the cleansing baths that they have for women. The mikvah is built, if they go to a new place, the mikvah is built before the temple is even built. Because they believe the woman's fucking vagina is so toxic and poisonous that it has to be cleansed after every period. They have to go into this nasty standing water and cleanse themselves and then run home so their husbands will have sex with them. They eat the foreskins, they eat the placentas. Like, it's fucking horrendous. And the foundation of it is supremacist. The idea that they are born chosen by God. And the rest of us are just Gentiles, just goyim, here to service them. That's it. We're not here to be special. We're not here to achieve unless they want us to. We're here for their service. Why is the Diddy story went away? You ever wonder that? It wouldn't happen to do with the fact that Diddy claimed to have video of all the people that were at his parties. He had hidden cameras set up everywhere, and he caught all of it on video. Now, that last fire that happened in California is said to have destroyed a lot of that evidence. That's why the fire took place. It started in 3 different locations and triangulated in a perfect, I mean, it's all just bullshit. We have a song called hashtag nice try Diddy that points out the fact that Diddy is just a fucking small little piece pawn in this that was given his position by who? You really think Diddy was just so talented? Show me one star from Breaking the Band. That show existed for quite some time. Show me one star that came out of it. Still active today. This is all just manufactured bullshit. There's the video of Justin Bieber giving head. A fucked up young Justin Bieber giving head to a guy. He pops up and he looks all like, what the fuck you doing? It all exists. It's all there for us to see it. We need to unify. They've had you so distracted by your belief in your fake Jesus, your fake. You understand that even Jesus is one of them. How do you not understand this? It's such fake bullshit nonsense, and anybody that believes in Tartaria or believes in resets or anything like that, for you to still think Christianity has any sort of merit, you're just fooling yourself. You're just lying, I guess, so that you can feel better about what you believe. But it's all bullshit. And Tartaria to me and the reset stuff is such fascinating distraction. It's so, it's so clearly true. Look at the star forts all around the world with the people that supposedly weren't in contact but still built the same buildings, the same star forts. Star forts are not something that we could do today. Star fort cities especially. We just cannot do it. So to think that the people with bronze tools and shit, that they could do it, is just insultingly stupid. The boxes that are in the big, the big granite boxes that are inside the pyramids, labyrinth of tunnels and shit, that weigh so much we can't move them. We have no idea how they were able to do it. The fact that there's no scorch marks in the tombs, in the tunnels of all that. It's there's just so much showing you that the narrative we're given isn't true. But the fact is, until we Goyim unite and overthrow the Jays that control that narrative, we only know what they allow us to. Everything Tartaria is stuff that they've allowed to leak out. Because what can we do? We only know what they allow us to know. And for you to think that we were capable of building the Empire State Building in 1 year in 1928 or whatever it was, 1970, I don't remember, but to think that anybody could be capable of building that building in 1 year is a fucking joke. There's another guy, Damian Michael. I'd love to talk to that guy. But I just can't help but wonder, like, I pointed out, like, dude, why do you think that you're allowed to have thousands and thousands of views? It's because you're providing the distraction. Tartaria being one of the best distractions they've ever given us because everything is so obviously true. But this is how they operate. This is what they do. They give us the distractions so that we don't focus on them. Everything is about preventing us Goyim from focusing on them. And it works like gangbusters, Well, I guess to some degree. Because they keep trying to present us with shit, like the astronauts being stuck in space for 9 months. Go look up how they ate. How did they eat? If they're not getting supplies, which they couldn't have been, because if they were getting supplies, then they could have just gotten on the supply vessel and come down. And then when you look at the narrative, so the narrative is they came back after 9 months. They were in the capsule. Well, the capsule had to be attached to the thing the whole time. Who brought the capsule up? If somebody brought up a capsule, then why did they, what took them so long? And if nobody did bring up the capsule, then the capsule had to be there the whole time. And the best part, and it's funny because nobody really talks about this. Everybody talks about the footage of the capsule in the water and how the water is on a 10-second loop and how fake everything looks. But the narrative that they give us is that it took 17 hours from the time the capsule was let go of by the space station. I don't even know. From the time the capsule first dropped to the time that the astronauts hit the water was 17 hours. How did it take 17 hours to fall? A metal teardrop-shaped object falling. How does that take 17 hours? And the thing is, they keep giving us these narratives, these distractions, and within, a day or two, the Goyim have started to scrutinize these things and blow the whole narrative apart, so they have to move on to something else. And this time they moved on to Katy Perry and Gayle King went for a ride. Don't say that, though. Gayle gets really mad when you say she went for a ride because she's a woman. Because I'm a woman. Isn't it funny how they all went on this ride through space and yet they all had their makeup on? Gayle still had on her goofy ass wigs. Gayle King is one of the worst, dumbest clowns that they've ever presented to us. If you ever notice when Gayle goes off script, so Gayle's really good at reading the script, reading the teleprompter. Not really good, but as soon as she has to speak on her own, it turns into looking all around, because she's an idiot. And they gave us that narrative, and then it went away. Have you guys heard anything about that since? Have any of you heard anything about the Katy Perry Gayle King capsule? Since all the videos came out showing what bullshit it is? The size of the capsule that was supposedly falling with the parachutes compared to the size of the capsule that they came out of? Do you see when the capsule supposedly hit the ground, how hard that thing supposedly hit the ground? Even with the parachutes, boom, huge dust cloud came up, like a jarring hit that if somebody was in it and sitting down, their whole spine would have been fucked up from hitting the ground that hard. Nope. Nope. But these are all just distractions. These are all things to focus on. Oh, look at the patch. Look at the patch. If you turn it upside down, it's a Baphomet. Are you? You know, the whole idea of like the devil and all this, it's just so stupid. The thing about the Bible is stupid. I don't know if you've actually read it, but it's really, really dumb. And the thing is, if you believe the shit that they give you, you end up believing stupid things, which makes you stupid. You might not be stupid. You might be smart enough to figure out all kinds of shit. Given math problems or situational problems, and then you can figure your way out of it. But when you're regurgitating stupidity, that makes you stupid. You know, I can't stand when I see black people who are Christians. It just drives me fucking crazy. Just based on the narrative we're given, which I don't believe in. I don't believe in the slavery narrative. I don't believe in the Native American genocide bullshit. I don't believe that stuff. But you do. And for you to believe that black people were slaves for 400 years and all this other bullshit, and then for you to be like, but I'm a Christian, it's just mind-blowing. How can you be that stupid?
Seriously? So I just went to go pick this up from the free group from somebody's house. And you have to park in the street. So I parked in the street and had the car running. I ran up to the lady's house, grabbed the bag. And this dude across the street was blowing the leaves and shit off of the street. And I had the window open in the truck. He was blowing all the shit, like, towards our truck, like, towards the driver's side with the window open. And I walked down and I looked at him and I said, you couldn't wait? You hear my truck running. I'm just picking something up from the porch. And he just gave me a shitty look and kept blowing.
But see, everybody's tough when you're dealing with a 5'2" female. You know?
Well, he was maybe 5'4".
You're still a female.
Oh, it was so bad. How fucking rude is that? You're in the middle of the street.
He would never do that shit to me.
My truck is running. I'm coming right back.
No.
Windows open. What the fuck is wrong with you?
You see it constantly. With these...
Entitled asshole.
You know, you see it in all of these videos where these Jays are attacking women. You know, I almost want to go back there and just be like, dude, do it to me now.
Fucking dick.
Yeah, well, he's Jay. What do you expect? The thing is, like I say, my wife doesn't necessarily want to agree with me. It's part of being married. She just doesn't want to agree with me in any of it. But when it comes to this, she's a better person than I am. Right? She's much more caring and much more, you know, you can walk all over my wife well before you can walk all over me. I'm the one that comes in when the situation gets bad. When you want to, you know, deal with the bullshit and you want somebody to cater to your shit and the shoulder to cry on, then yeah, my wife will be there for you. But as soon as it crosses that line, I step in. And you'd be surprised how many people won't do the same shit to me. But especially not this goofy little J guy who is blowing his leaves. I would have kicked his fucking ass. I wouldn't even had to because he wouldn't have done it. He just wouldn't have done it. He would have seen me. I would have made eye contact with him. He would have seen my size and been like, oh no. Oh no, I'm not doing that. You know, it's crazy. We don't talk about how inbred these fucking people are. Isn't it amazing how they all sort of look the same? Well, the only way that happens is through inbreeding. This is an inbred piece of shit cult. And like I said, my wife doesn't want to agree, but story after story keeps proving it. Personal experience after personal experience keeps proving what disgusting, entitled piece of shit people these are. I hate using the term people. And I don't want to insult animals by calling them animals, so I just don't even know what to do. Like their species of creature is just disgusting. They're really, really awful fucking people. Oh, well, I've had Jays be nice to me before. Yeah, because they know better. You know? They know that they don't have the numbers. They make up 0.183% of the world's population. They supposedly only make up 2% of the American population. It's not even 2 to 4, it's just 2. I used to think it was 2 to 4, but the things that we recently read said it's just 2. The last thing they need is for the 99.8, 2% of the population to turn against them. And you always hear this bullshit about how they're the most persecuted people in history. They've been kicked out of 100 different countries in the last 1,000 years. Everybody's always so mean. Does anybody ever address why? Why have they been kicked out of so many countries over the years? I can tell you a big part of it is circumcision and their ritual. You know, I was reading something yesterday about well poisoning. Look up well poisoning on Wikipedia. You're not supposed to say that the Jays poison wells, drinking water wells. Yet, throughout history, the documented incidents of well poisonings is like 90% them. Yet, if you then say that they poisoned a well, oh, that's blood libel. You know, it's really fucking fascinating to the point where I'm actually going to show you guys because I guess Prince Harry is in some shit now, huh? Well, poisoning. God damn it. Okay, so, right? Well poisoning, you see that? Okay. I'm going to look up the exact thing. Well poisoning, Wikipedia. There you go. Okay. Water resources in order to cause illness or death, or to deny an opponent access to fresh water resources. Well poisoning has been historically documented as a strategy during wartime since antiquity, and was used both offensively as a terror attack to disrupt and depopulate a target area, and defensively as a scorched earth tactic to deny any invading army resources of clean water or sources of clean water. Rotting corpses, both animal and human, thrown down at wells were the most common implementation. In one of the earliest examples of biological warfare, corpses known to have died from common transmittable diseases of the pre-modern era, such as bubonic plague or tuberculosis, were especially favored for well poisoning. So look at this. Okay, see? This is well poisoning. You come down. I just read that first part. And then the second against Jays. These are the only options. They don't have a whole bunch of other options. But let's read more. Instances of medieval usage. Well poisoning has been used as an important scorched earth tactic at least since medieval times. In 1462, listen, this is just ridiculous. In 1462, so we know we have a lot of records about 1462, right? We know all about 1462. For example, Prince Vlad III the Impaler of Wallachia utilized this method to delay his pursuing adversaries. Nearly 500 years later, so we don't have all these instances like they want to pretend. If they had more instances, they would tell us. So they're going from 1462 to now, we're just going to jump 500 years. Nearly 500 years later, during the Winter War, the Finns rendered wells unusable by putting animal carcasses or feces in them in order to passively combat invading Soviet forces. Yeah, that makes sense. Now we're just going to jump again. During the 20th century, the practice of poisoning wells has lost most of its potency and practicality against an organized force as modern military logistics ensure secure and decontaminated supplies and resources. Nevertheless, German forces during the First World War poisoned wells in France as part of Operation Elbrecht. After World War II, NACM, a paramilitary organization of about 50 Holocaust survivors, sought revenge for the murder of 6 million Jays during the Holocaust. You see how they're manipulating here? They're justifying it. These are the Holocaust survivors, and as revenge for the murder of the 6 million, which isn't a fucking viable number by any stretch of the imagination. But they're saying that for revenge for that, the group's leader, Abba Kovner, went to mandatory Palestine in order to secure large quantities of poison for poisoning water mains to kill large numbers of Germans. His followers infiltrated the water system of Nuremberg. However, Kovner was arrested upon arrival in the British zone of occupied Germany and had to throw the poison overboard. Into the water system? They threw the poison into the water?
Your phone's kind of cutting in and out.
Israel poisoned the wells and water supplies of certain Palestinian towns like Acre, the first one, and villages as part of their biological warfare program during the 1948 Palestinian War called Operation Cast Thy Bread. Look it up. Operation Cast Thy Bread. Including a successful operation that caused a typhoid epidemic in Acre in early May 1948. Well, the Nakba, where the see, it's always interesting because how did Israel have a military if Israel didn't exist? Come on. How do you have a military for a country that doesn't exist? But before the Israeli military took over Acre, which is the first town that was taken over in the Palestinian genocide that is the Nakba, they poisoned the wells. May 15th is the date of the Nakba. And prior to that, they poisoned the drinking water supply. And an unsuccessful attempt in Gaza that was foiled by the Egyptians in late May. They say that they foiled it, but I doubt it. In the late 20th century, and now remember, this is what they want us to know. This is the most sterilized, cleanest version that they can still tell us about it, but, you know, make it so it's kosher. This is the best they can come up with, while also letting us know that they do this and they don't get in trouble for it. In the late 20th century, accusations of well poisoning were brought up, most notoriously in relation to the Kosovo Liberation War. In the 21st century, Israeli settlers have been condemned due to suspicions of poisoning wells of villages in the occupied Palestine. I mean, this is what they do. So now we go to as libel against Jays. 2,000 Jays burned to death in Strasbourg in 1349 during the Black Death. So that whole Black Death thing that hit Europe and killed all those people, you don't realize it, but back then, everybody was saying it's the Jays. They keep poisoning the water system. That's why everybody is suddenly getting sick. Despite some vague understanding of how diseases could spread, the existence of viruses and bacteria was unknown in medieval times, and the outbreak of disease could not be specifically explained. Until the 1880s, when they invented the idea of germs, you know, the Germans, the germs, the invisible germs attacking people, invading them, invading germs. They invented that idea in the 80s, in the 1880s. Prior to that, what people believed got them sick was called miasma, or bad air. So if you had a bunch of dead horses in your streets along with a bunch of horse shit and all that stuff, then that would cause people to get sick. You know, but who's to say? I mean, that could be the death and all that leaking into the water. Who knows? Who knows what it was? But any sudden deterioration of health was often blamed on poisoning. See, they're trying to justify it. They're trying to normalize it and sort of downplay the significance of this by saying, oh yeah, back then everybody just, anytime people got sick, they just said it was poisoning. Yeah, that's all it was. Europe was hit by several waves of the Black Death throughout the late Middle Ages. Crowded cities were especially hit hard by the disease, with death tolls as high as 50% of the population. In their distress, emotionally distraught survivors searched desperately for an explanation. So, just out of desperation and being emotionally distraught and all that, not anything to do with any sort of reality, the city-dwelling Jays of the Middle Ages, living in walled-up, segregated ghetto districts aroused suspicion. Because again, they were so persecuted that they were given large tracts of land with walls around it, protected wall. Like, that's what you do, right? You give them their own land. If you don't like them, you give them their own thing. You don't just get rid of them. You're like, here, you can have this part of the city here. This is all yours. But because they were distraught and upset about the sudden deaths that apparently just came out of nowhere, the Black Death, they just were like, who can we blame? Oh, let's blame these people that had nothing to do with it, right? That's how that works. An outbreak of plague thus became the trigger for Black Death persecutions, with hundreds of Jays burned at the stake or rounded up in synagogues and private houses that were then set aflame. Like, they still use this same bullshit narrative. They still use this, oh, we're the victims. Look at how we're persecuted just for our beliefs. Just for nothing, just because we believe something differently. Walter LeCure writes in his book, The Changing Face of Anti-Semitism, From Ancient Times to Present Day. There were no mass attacks against Jay poisoners after the period of the Black Death, but the accusation became part and parcel of anti-Semitic dogma and language. It appeared again in early 1953 in the form of the Doctor's Plot, in Stalin's last days, when hundreds of J physicians in the Soviet Union were arrested and some of them killed on the charge of having caused the death of prominent communist leaders. Right, because that's what they were doing. Similar charges were made in the 1980s and 90s in the radical Arab nationalist and Muslim fundamentalist propaganda that accused the Jays of spreading AIDS and other infectious diseases. Because in Africa, AIDS appears shortly after all these UNESCO and humanitarian groups decided that they would go down to Africa and just start vaccinating everybody they could against hepatitis and shit like that. They injected something into the people and then suddenly AIDS comes out, but it's because they were fucking monkeys. Those terrible black people were fucking monkeys. That's what caused it. Talk about just insulting all the way around. Modern instances of anti-Semitic libel. Allegations of well poisoning entwined with anti-Semitism have also emerged in the discourse around modern epidemics and pandemics such as swine flu, Ebola, avian flu, SARS, and COVID-19. Isn't that weird how nobody else gets that? There's no other group that is consistently accused of poisoning drinking water systems. Speaking of which, did you guys know that the fluoride that's in your drinking water, that's there to make your teeth better, to prevent cavities, only has a, quote, it might have a 3, well, so if you look it up on Wikipedia, it'll say as high as 26%. But if you actually go to the study, the Cochrane study page, the website for the Cochrane study, they tell you that it's only might have a 3% chance. So I'll say a 3 to 26% chance of preventing cavities in adult teeth. Do you think that's worth it? Not natural, but synthetic sodium or synthetic fluoride, which is the byproduct, the waste from the production of fertilizer. So they make fertilizer, and then the waste that comes from the production of the fertilizer is then this synthetic fluoride that they put into the drinking water systems, because it might have a 3 to 26% chance of preventing cavities in adult teeth. 3% to 26% is chance. That's not a thing. If I gave you a parachute, we're in a plane, and I say, here's a parachute, it might have a 3 to 26% chance of opening. It might open 1 out of 4 times. How many times are you guys going to be, okay, strap it on, let's go? Would any of you do that? And yet, poisoning the water system with this fluoride, that are you dumb enough to think that fluoride only might affect your teeth? It doesn't have any other effect on any part of your body whatsoever. Do you realize how fucking stupid that is, and how that totally fits in with the narrative we're given about poisoning water wells, water supplies? EU address by Mahmoud Abbas. So it's funny because Mahmoud Abbas has just disappeared. Haven't heard from him since prior to October 7th, 2023, when no Israelis were killed or taken hostage. It's all fake bullshit. But Mahmoud Abbas was the Israelis that control Gaza and Palestine and whatnot, to perpetuate the illusion of some sort of Palestinian leadership, government, whatever it may be. They allowed, and they put in place and allowed Mahmoud Abbas to be like the leader. And and he would cause reactions and be condemned and blah, blah, blah. But here you have, in his address to the European Parliament on June 23rd, 2016 in Brussels, Palestinian Authority, that's the leader, Palestinian Authority President and PLO Chairman Mahmoud Abbas made an unsubstantiated allegation, quote, accusing rabbis of poisoning Palestinian wells. This was based on false media reports saying Israeli rabbis were inciting the poisoning of the water of Palestinians, led by Rabbi Shlomo Milmar, or Milmad, because they all have double names for some fucking reason, from the Council of Rabbis in the West Bank settlements. Isn't that a very specific bunch of details for something that wasn't true? It's not like they said, oh, well, we think it might be this. No, they're saying it's this because this guy incited, this guy who's a part of this organization and this group who incited this. Like, sure is a lot of details for something that isn't true. A rabbi by that name could not be located, nor is such an organization listed. Well, then it must be true, right? It must be true. Again, I don't think all of this is true, but this is what they want us to know. Abbas said, only a week ago, a number of rabbis in Israel announced and made a clear announcement demanding that their government poison the water to kill the Palestinians. Isn't that clear incitement to commit mass killings against the Palestinian people? The speech received a standing ovation. The speech was described as echoing anti-Semitic claims. See, it's funny how they don't deny it. They just throw these terms out there and they tell you not to say it. Oh, that's anti-Semitic. He is Semitic. Mahmoud Abbas is Semitic. What? Are you kidding me? Like, this is that insanity that they put out there. Like when Kanye did his job and said what he was supposed to say, and then apparently this one group called the Goyim Liberation Front, no. It was some sort of they called themselves the Goyim something group, was supposedly holding signs on an overpass that said Kanye was right. One overpass in the middle of California or whatever it was, people. This was national news that this fringe little nothing group was holding signs that said Kanye was right. And the news kept associating this white supremacist group, associating a white supremacist group with Kanye West. But that was because that's that's the protocol. That's what they're not smart. They're really dumb people. If you open up the books on Israel, you demonize Israel. Well, then Israel must be a bad place. You can open up the books on me all day. You're not going to demonize me. I didn't do anything to be demonized. But this is the kind of bullshit that they do. They're calling the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas anti-Semitic. A day later, on Saturday, June 26, Abbas admitted that his claims at the EU were baseless. Abbas further said that he didn't intend to do harm to Jayism or to offend Jay people around the world. One day later, what do you think happened in that one day? Since Abbas answers to Israeli authorities, he is allowed to be in his position because Israel allows him to be. Or allowed, I don't know where he is. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stated in reaction that Abbas had spread a blood libel in his European Parliament address. And then that's it. That's it. Let's look up blood libel. Blood libel, or ritual murder libel, or also blood accusation, is an anti-Semitic canard which falsely accuses Jays of murdering Christians in order to use their blood in the performance of religious rituals. Again, interesting how it's only this one group that has this constant accusation thrown their way. Isn't that strange? Why doesn't anybody else have this accusation thrown their way? Echoing very old myths of secret cultic practices in many prehistoric societies, the claim, as it is leveled against Jays, was rarely attested to in antiquity. According to Tertullian, it originally emerged in late antiquity as an accusation made against members of the early Christian community of the Roman Empire. Once this accusation had been dismissed, it was revived a millennium later as a Christian slander against Jays in the medieval period. The first examples of medieval blood libel emerged in England in the mid-1100s before spreading into other parts of Europe, especially France and Germany. There's Germany yet again. You know that Germany, the Germans don't call themselves German. Why do we call them German? No idea. But they call themselves the Deutsch. They speak Deutsch. Their country is called Deutschland. So why do we call it Germany? and it's, Germany is such a main part of history throughout all of history. But I'm sure it's just coincidence. This libel, alongside those of well poisoning, gosh, it's all connected, and host desecration, what's host desecration, became a major theme in the persecution of Jays in Europe from that period down to modern times. Gee, that's strange. Statue of Simon of Trent, an Italian child whose disappearance and death was blamed on the leaders of the city's Jay community because he was found with a bunch of little holes in him and his blood was drained. But hey, nothing to see there. Blood libels often claim that Jays require human blood for the baking of matzah, an unleavened flatbread which is eaten during Passover. Earlier versions of the blood libel accused Jays of ritually reenacting the crucifixion. The accusations often assert that the blood of Christian children is especially coveted, and historically, blood libel claims have been made in order to account for the otherwise unexplained deaths of children. So it's not otherwise unexplained. It's that the other explanations didn't fit and that this one did. Many of these most prominently, William of Norwich, all those people that are first name people, 1144, Little St. Hugh of Lincoln, 1255, and Simon of Trent, 1475, became objects of local cults and veneration. The cult of Hugh of Lincoln gained the support of Henry III and his son Edward I, giving it official credibility and helping it to be particularly well remembered. Although he was never canonized, the veneration of Simon was added to the general Roman calendar. One child who was allegedly murdered by Jays, Gabriel of Bialystok, was canonized by the Russian Orthodox Church. All just out of fantasy, huh? Strange how if it's just fantasy, they didn't do it more often. In Jay lore, blood libels serve as the impetus for the creation of the Golem of Prague by Rabbi Judah Lo Ben Bezazel. Oh, gee, Bezazel. Like Bezazel Smoltrich. That's who he's named after. In the 16th century, the term blood libel has also been used in reference to any unpleasant or damaging false accusation, and as a result, it has acquired a broader metaphoric meaning. However, this wider usage of the term remains controversial. History. The earliest versions of the accusations involving Jays supposedly crucifying Christian children on Easter Passover is said to be because of a prophecy. There is no reference to the use of blood in unleavened matzah bread at this time yet, which develops later as a major motivation for the crime. Possible precursors. The earliest known antecedent is the 10th century from Democritus, not Democritus the philosopher, mentioned in the Suda, who alleged that every 7 years the Jays captured a stranger, brought him into the temple in Jerusalem, and sacrificed him, cutting his flesh into bits. The Greco-Egyptian author Appian claimed that the Jays sacrificed Greek victims in their temple. Here, the writer states that when Antiochus Epiphanes, oh, I know this name. What is he from? Was the king of the Seleucid Empire. Okay, so this guy is quick break. So the reason Hanukkah is celebrated is in the like 232s BC. So the way that the narrative is presented is that the Jays were being persecuted. They were, quote, made to eat that wasn't kosher. They were made to worship on Sunday instead of Saturday, which are both of those things are just like, how do you make somebody eat meat? Unless you're like holding them down, making them eat. How do you make them eat meat that isn't kosher? How do you make somebody worship on a Sunday instead of a Saturday? You're telling me they couldn't just worship on their own in their own houses and do what they wanted to do on Saturday? They couldn't do that? And then the third thing is the outlawing of circumcision because it's wrong and awful, amongst other things, it'll say. So the Maccabees, the one guy, John Maccabee, whatever, I don't know what his fucking first name is, but Maccabee was a guy who decided that he was no longer going to play along and that he was going to circumcise who the fuck he wanted to circumcise. It wasn't like he was just going to worship on Saturday. He was just going to start eating only kosher meat. No. The thing that mattered to him was circumcision. So he decided that he was going to circumcise himself and his family. And then he went around the country, which, because, back then, traveling around the country was no problem. He went around the country, and he happened to also know where all the Jays lived somehow. Went to all these different Jay places where they were like, hey, they still let us believe what we want. They just don't want us doing it. Because again, I'm not even sure. How would you ever know if somebody was circumcised or not? It's not like people were walking around naked back then, but apparently they knew. But he went around to all these different J locations and said, look, I'm going to give you the option to circumcise yourself and your family, or we kill you. Jays killing Jays because they refused to circumcise. And eventually they got enough people that were like, okay, we're going to circumcise. And then once they circumcised, they joined the rebellion. They joined the group that walked, rode horse. I don't know how the fuck they got all over the country, but they went around the country. So eventually they built up a big enough army that they attacked the Seleucid Empire. That was who was Seleucids. I don't know how you say it. How do you say this?
Seleucid.
Seleucid, okay, the Seleucid Empire. And it was like another it's a bunch of years that this went on that they eventually won the right to be able to circumcise again. And that is what Hanukkah is the celebration of. Hanukkah is a celebration of the right to circumcise. Like, it's so fucked up. I knew Antiochus, Antiochus, I don't know, of Epiphany. I knew that name. And of course, the statue has the nose broken off. No reason. His Antiochus the Fourth Epiphanes, 215 minus 215 BC, November, December, or minus 215 BC to minus 164 BC, November, December, was the king of the Seleucid Empire from 175 until his death in 164. Notable events during Antiochus's reign include the near conquest of the Ptolemaic Egypt, his persecution of the Jays in Judea and Samaria, and the rebellion of the J Maccabees. I mean, you can try to tell me I'm wrong. The rebellion of the Maccabees was a J rebellion led by the Maccabees against the Seleucid Empire and against Hellenistic influence on J life. The main phase of the revolt lasted from 167 to 160 BCE this time and ended with the Seleucids in control of Judea, but conflict between the Maccabees, Hellenized Jays, and the Seleucids continued until 134, with the Maccabees eventually attaining independence. 30 fucking years? They fought for 30 years. They were able to maintain a war for 30 years. Seleucid king Antiochus of Epiphanes launched a massive campaign of repression against the J religion in 168 BCE. The reason he did so is not entirely clear, but it seems to have been related to the king mistaking an internal conflict among the J priesthood as a full-scale rebellion. Now remember, this is this is before Christ. So this whole narrative that they were persecuted because they killed Christ, this is before then. I have to go pee. Can you man the helm real quick?
Yeah. What are we talking about?
What do you think we're talking about? We're talking about the Maccabees and the Jays and circumcision and all that fun stuff.
Yeah. That's crazy shit. I don't know. I'm looking up oil stuff, so I'm out of the loop. I'm sorry. Circumcision, that's a very controversial subject because, there's, I get that I get the where it came from and the premise and everything, but I'm also on the other side of, you know, the society built norm. I don't know. I knew too many people that got teased for it and that type of shit. So, and there is validity to the you get infections type of thing. There's also like, as a female and a mom of boys, I would have felt like I was fondling my son's all the time trying to move the skin around and clean it all up and getting poop out of it and all that type of shit. So I don't know. I would have been mortified had I had to handle it so much extra and then have, the natural physiological reaction to that touch. I would have been mortified thinking, oh my God, I'm molesting my kid. And it would have really grossed me out. So I don't know. There's more than one side to that coin, in my opinion, but that doesn't matter. So
Which coin?
the circumcision coin.
What do you mean?
I'm not 100% against it because there's other aspects of it other than the religious and where it came from. And I mean, I would have felt like I was fucking molesting our children every time I had to change their diaper, especially poopy ones.
Why?
Because you have to move all the skin all around and clean it all up, and
Yeah, but you're
infection is a huge deal with foreskin.
But you're not, and that's not nearly as...
Yeah, well, as a female, that would have been really gross
That's not
for me.
as near as common or as major as you think it is. It's just not. You know.
How do you know how many uncircumcised penises have you seen and touched?
Because the narrative would be out there. You would
No,
see,
it wouldn't.
Yes, you would. You would see a bunch of people talking about, oh, it's so disgusting because I had to do this and I had it's just there would be more negatives to it. But it's mutilation. There's no acceptable cause or reason to be mutilating babies. It's just...
I think mutilation is harsh because you're not disfiguring them.
Absolutely,
you were taking off excess skin.
It's not excess skin. It's not just some excess skin that's hanging there. There are important glands. It's much more important than people realize. And you're coming from a completely manipulated American perspective on it. But if all of that was true, then it wouldn't be specifically, Europe wouldn't say things like the risks are far more worse than the benefits. The benefits do not outweigh the risks.
The benefits being?
The benefits to circumcision.
No, the benefits to not being circumcised? Or what?
Well, you're not traumatized and mutilated at a young age. The glands and whatnot help with lubrication. They also make your penis slightly bigger. And there's a lot more to it than I know. There's a lot, but there's no... What's the benefit? What's the benefit to doing it?
You're not prone to infections as much.
You don't... When was the last time you heard about somebody having a tremendous penis infection that
people aren't going to talk about that?
You would still hear about it.
The majority are circumcised, so it's
not worldwide. You would hear about...
We don't hear shit from overseas.
You would hear about all sorts of stories. You'd be able to at least come up with one where this baby died or got sick because their penis got infected. It's just not a thing. Those are all the fucking goofy narratives that they've put out there so people believe them. But it's just not true.
And it does not make your penis bigger to have foreskin.
Absolutely it does. If you're cutting something off, then you're making it smaller by fucking definition.
Not hanging skin.
It's not hanging skin. And if anything, when the penis is erect, the skin pulls back on the head, creating little ripples that would benefit female orgasms. But it absolutely does add to size. I mean, you can't cut something off and say it's not any bigger. Anyway, the reason he did so is unclear. J practices were banned. Jerusalem was placed under direct Seleucid control, and the Second Temple in Jerusalem was made the site of the syncretic pagan J cult. This repression triggered the revolt that Antiochus IV had feared. with a group of J fighters led by Judah Maccabee, and his family rebelling in 167 BC and seeking independence. The rebels as a whole would come to be known as the Maccabees, and their actions would be chronicled later in the books 1 Maccabees and 2 Maccabees. The rebellion started as a guerrilla movement in the Judea countryside. So remember, all these people, they just jumped on their horses and shit. They walked around. Raiding towns and terrorizing Greek officials far from direct Seleucid control, but it eventually developed a proper army capable of attacking the fortified Seleucid cities. In 164 BCE, the Maccabees captured Jerusalem, a significant early victory. The subsequent cleansing of the temple and rededication of the altar on 25 Kislev is the source of the festival of Hanukkah. The Seleucids eventually relented and unbanned Jayism, but the more radical Maccabees, not content with merely reestablishing Jay practices under Seleucid rule, continued to fight, pushing for a more direct break with the Seleucids. Judas Maccabeus died in 160 BCE at the Battle of Elasa against the Greek general Bacchides. See, it's funny too. My wife's saying this, right? My wife's Greek, and when it comes down to supposedly everything from math to science to architecture to all these things, they supposedly all come from the Greeks. The Greeks who were so fucking awesome, they could build the Parthenon and you know all this shit. The Greeks were just incredible. And they abhorred circumcision. They said it was wrong, 100%, no doubt about it. Fucking, you can't do that. So are we to believe that the Greeks, who were this super advanced people who gave us everything we have today, modern science-wise and math and all that, the one thing they were wrong about was circumcision? Are we serious here? Is that what you're willing to say? Why did the Greeks, who gave us everything, and were just so fucking advanced and so awesome, why did they abhor it? Because it was wrong. And the Seleucids, against the Greek, blah, blah, and the Seleucids reestablished direct control for a time, but remnants of the Maccabees under Judas's brother, Jonathan Aphus, because, you know, you have different names in a family, continued to resist from the countryside. Eventually, internal division among the Seleucids and problems elsewhere in their empire would give the Maccabees their chance for proper independence. In 141 BC, Simon Thassus succeeded in expelling the Greeks from their citadel in Jerusalem. An alliance with the Roman Republic helped guarantee their independence. Simon would go on to establish the independent Hasmonean kingdom. 14th century Christian work depicting Antiochus praying to the horned idol at the temple. The book of Daniel describes an abomination of desolation being given authority over the temple, as well as the daily offering and sacrifice ceasing. Right, because again, the term Holocaust means a burnt offering in Yiddish, I think, because Hebrew is the youngest language on the planet. So to say it's Hebrew is wrong. But Holocaust, isn't it interesting how it's the term Holocaust means a burnt offering, and that's what they call the supposed genocide, a burnt offering? Isn't that strange? Beginning in 338 BC, because again, we have all these great records of 2,000 plus years ago. Alexander the Great, I am a direct descendant of Alexander the Great, began an invasion of the Persian Empire in 332 BCE. Alexander's Macedonian forces conquered the Levant, including Palestine. I thought Palestine didn't exist. At the time, Judea was home to many Jays who had returned from exile in Babylon, thanks to the Parisians. You gotta love that one, right? That seriously has to be one of my favorite dumbass stories. That they supposedly wandered around the desert for 40 fucking years. How do you wander the desert for how do you survive? Where do you get your water from? Where do you get your food from? How do you survive the desert sun, the desert daytime, and the cold at night for 40 fucking years? How do you not get out there for 40 years? I mean, what? Oh, let's see. At the time, blah, 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 Alexander's empire was partitioned in 323 BCE after Alexander's death and after the wars of the Diadochi. The territory was taken by what would become Ptolemaic Egypt in 302 and 301 BCE. Another of the Greek successor states, the Seleucid Empire, would conquer Judea from Egypt during a series of campaigns from 235 to 198. I mean, do you realize how stupid all of this is? During the Ptolemaic and Seleucid rule, many Jays learned Koine Greek, especially upper-class Jays and Jay minorities in towns further afield from Jerusalem and more attached to Greek trading networks. Greek philosophical ideas spread through the region as well. A Greek translation of the scriptures, the Septuagint, was also created during the 3rd century BCE. Many Jays adopted dual names with both a Greek name and a Hebrew name, such as Jason and Joshua. Still, many Jays continued to speak the Aramaic language and the language that descended from what was spoken during Babylonian exile. In general, the ruling Greek policy during this time period was to let Jays manage their own affairs and not interfere overtly with religious matters. Greek authors in the 3rd century BCE who wrote about Jayism did so most positively. Cultural change did happen, but was largely driven by Jays themselves, inspired by ideas from abroad. Greek rulers did not undertake explicit programs of forced Hellenization. Antiochus IV Epiphanes came to the throne in the Seleucids in 175 BCE and did not change this policy. He appears to have done little to antagonize the region at first, and the Jays were largely content under his rule. One element that would come to later prominence was Antiochus replacing the high priest Onias III with his brother Jason, after Jason offered a large sum of money to Antiochus. Where did Jason get his money from? Jason also sought and received permission to make Jerusalem a self-governing polis, albeit with Jason able to control the citizenship lists of who would be able to vote and hold political office. 2,000 years ago. Oh, it's so stupid. These changes did not immediately appear to rouse any particular complaint from the majority of the citizenry in Jerusalem, and presumably he still kept the basic J laws and tenets. 3 years later, a newcomer named Millennius offered an even larger bribe to Antiochus for the position of high priest. Jason, resentful, turned against Antiochus. Additionally, a rumor spread that Millennius had stolen golden temple artifacts to help pay for the bribe, leading to unhappiness, especially among the city council Jason had established. This sounds like a real history to you. And man, isn't this an amazing amount of detail for 2,000 plus years ago? You know, when it comes to the greatest achievement known to man, leaving this planet and going and landing on the moon, the telemetry data, which is the data that proves how, the logistical data on how they got from point A to point B and then back from point A to point B. Reams of data, a whole room full of data was lost. Lost. We've lost that data. But I'll be damned if we don't know all of these fucking little details about what it was like in 175 BCE. The conflict was largely political rather than cultural. All sides at this point were Hellenized, content with Seleucid rule, and primarily divided among Melanius's alleged corruption and sacrilege. I mean, we're talking about, 50, 60 years. We're talking about these large periods of time. But they make it sound like it's nothing. In 170 to 168 BCE, the Sixth Syrian War between the Seleucids and the Ptolemaic Egyptians arose. Now, again, who were the combatants? All these farmers and shit that were just, again, it wasn't like there were transport vehicles or anything. But they were just, you got to come fight this, leave your homestead at home and come fight. And then these large armies. How did they feed all these large armies? The logistics behind how they moved them, how they communicated, all that stuff, we don't know that. Don't worry about that stuff. On his way back through Jerusalem after the successful campaign, High Priest Melanius allegedly invited Antiochus inside the Second Temple in violation of J law. And he raided the temple treasury for 1,800 talents. That's a form of money, I guess. Tensions with the Ptolemaic dynasty continued, and Antiochus rode out on a campaign in 168 BCE. Jason heard a rumor that Antiochus had perished and launched an attempted coup against Melanius in Jerusalem. Hearing of this, Antiochus, who was not dead, apparently interpreted this factional infighting as a revolt against his personal authority and sent an army to crush Jason's plotters. Again, this is 2,000 plus years ago. Who wrote all that? How did all of this survive? How do we have all of this detail? Well, how do we know? He felt this way. Where does this story even come from? This sounds like some ChatGPT nonsense to me, to the point where they fucked up and accidentally made one of the people Jason. His name is Jason. His name is fucking Jason. To crush Jason's plotters. From 168 to 167, the conflict spiraled out of control, and government policy radically shifted. Thousands in Jerusalem were killed, and thousands more were enslaved. The city was attacked twice. New Greek governors were sent. The government seized the land and property from Jason's supporters, and the temple in Jerusalem was made the site of a syncretic Greek J religious group, polluting it in the eyes of devout Jays. This is so fucking dumb. I would love to see where this information comes from. What the oldest accounts of this information are, what they're written on. What paper, what papyrus, whatever it is, was this shit written on, and it survived all of this time. A new citadel garrisoned by Greeks and pro-Seleucid Jays, the Acra, was built in Jerusalem. Antiochus issued decrees officially suppressing the Jay religion. Subjects were required to eat pork and violate Jay dietary law. They were required to eat pork. How do you require people to eat pork?
I don't know.
How do you enforce that? How does some king, some high priest in his dwelling, wherever it may be, how does he enforce making people eat pork? Work on the J Sabbath, cease circumcising their sons, and so on. This is the narrative you're given. I didn't make this shit up. The three things were that they had to eat pork, they had to work on Saturdays, apparently, which, you know, come on. How did they think about just the idea of working? What did they wake up in their little thatch houses, have their breakfast with their wife and 25 kids, jump on their horse, ride their horse into town where they went to the factory and punched in on a time clock that was a pterodactyl, and they would look at it's a living. Do you understand how ridiculous all of this is? But they had to eat pork and violate their dietary law, which I just, this sounds like some dumb J propaganda shit. And they made them eat pork. How? They held them down and forced the pork into their mouths?
Fuck.
The policy of tolerance of J worship was at an end. So, this is the part I wanted to get to. Because I knew you were like, well, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're talking about. Eat pork, work on Saturday, and stop cutting and sucking the baby penises. That's fucking gross. And so on. And so on. And so on. The rebellion. For Antiochus, the unexpected conquest of the city of Jerusalem, the looting, and the wholesale slaughter were not enough. His psychopathic tendency was exacerbated by resentment at what the siege had cost him, and he tried to force the Jays to violate their traditional codes of practice by leaving their infant sons uncircumcised and sacrificing pigs on the altar. These orders were universally ignored, and Antiochus had the most prominent recusants butchered. This is from Flavius Joseph, The J War, Book 1, 34-35. Does this sound like legitimate, like, historical record to you? And again, this guy said the first thing he said was leaving their infant sons uncircumcised. How dare they? That's clearly the main motivation behind this. Because in their shit, circumcision is one of the most important mitzvahs. One of the most important things in their religion is the cutting and sucking of baby penis. And you might hide behind the idea, my wife does, oh, well, that doesn't happen all the time. That doesn't happen all the time. Some of them don't even know about it, I'm sure. They do. They all know about it. But the idea that it doesn't happen in modern times is a little more believable. Back then, they all went through it. That's what the narrative they want you to know tells you. So then how dare you be like, oh, well, I know better. I never heard of this before. I never looked into it before, but I know you're wrong. In the aftermath of Antiochus issuing his decrees forbidding J religious practice, you mean forbidding the circumcision, a campaign of land confiscations paired with the shrine and altar building took place in the Judean countryside. Now, remember, this guy was well liked. There was no problems, none of that. He didn't have any of these psychopathic tendencies that were talked about prior to. But suddenly he's a psychopath because he doesn't want them to cut the babies up anymore. A rural J priest from Modin, Matthias, Hebrew for Mitayu, of the Hasmonean family, sparked the revolt against the Seleucid Empire by refusing to worship the Greek gods at Modin's new altar. I mean, just so stupid. So they would bring all the kids to the altar, They would require people to come to their altar that they built and then sacrifice an animal, just not a pig. And then they had their watchers stand, okay, you do that, okay. Matthias killed a Jay who had stepped forward to take Mattathias's place in sacrificing to an idol, as well as a Greek officer who was sent to enforce the sacrifice. He then destroyed the altar. Afterward, he and his 5 sons fled to the nearby mountains, which sat directly next to Modin. So, this Jay killed a Jay for stepping in front of him. And again, this was all written down after Mattathias, I don't know how you say it, death. About 1 year later, in 166, his son Judas Maccabeus, Hebrew Judea Maccabee, which is, again, why would his son have a different name? Is that how families work? My kids have a different last name than me? Did all 5 of his sons have a different last name? Were they all the same different last name? Or did they all have different last names? Led a band of Jay dissidents that would eventually absorb other groups opposed to Seleucid rule and grow into an army. While unable to directly strike Seleucid power at first, Judah's forces could maraud the countryside and attack Hellenized Jays, of whom there were many. They're talking about how they killed their own people. The ones who weren't circumcised. And how would they know? They're talking about this countryside. How would they fucking know? The Maccabees destroyed Greek altars in the villages, forcibly circumcised boys, burnt villages, and drove Hellenized Jays off their land. This is what Hanukkah celebrates, you guys. So the biggest killer of the Jays back then was the Jays. Judah's nickname, Maccabee, now used to describe the Jay partisans as a whole, is probably taken from the word hammer, Maccabic, or Macbeth. The term Maccabee or Maccabeus would later be used as an honorific for Judah's brothers as well. So we know all of this other shit, but we don't know where the name came from. Oh, it probably came from this. Judah's campaign in the countryside became a full-scale revolt. Maccabean forces employed guerrilla tactics, emphasizing speed and mobility. Yeah, you know them. The Jays are known for their speed and mobility. While less trained and under-equipped for pitched battles, the Maccabees could control which battles they took and retreat into the wilderness when threatened. Less trained and less equipped, and yet they still were able to win somehow. They must be awesome. I mean, it's come down the whole line. You know, the best fighters in the world are always Jay. The best athletes in the world are always Jay, right? They defeated 2 minor Seleucid forces at the Battle of the Ascent of Lebanon in 167 and the Battle of Beth Horon in 166. Again. And then I can click on those. The Battle of Ascent Lebanon and the Battle of Beth Horon or Horon. So apparently we have all of this information about these events that took place 2,000 1,000 plus years ago. Toward the summer of 165, Antiochus departed from Babylonia in the eastern half of his empire and left Lysias in charge of the western half as regent. Shortly afterward, the Maccabees won a more substantial victory at the Battle of Emmaus. I don't know. The factions attempted to negotiate a compromise but failed. A large Seleucid army was sent to quash the revolt. After the Battle of Beth Zur in 164, as well as news of the death of Antiochus in Persia, the Seleucid troops returned to Syria. The Maccabees entered Jerusalem in triumph. They ritually cleansed the Second Temple, reestablishing traditional J worship there. 25 Kislev, the date of the cleansing in the Hebrew calendar, would later become the date when the festival of Hanukkah begins. Am I still crazy? Am I still crazy, or are we going to go with this now? Do we understand? Like, I definitely don't need to read any more of this because this is just stupid. It's more just of the lie. I mean, this is such detailed information about all this shit that happened. Who wrote all this down? So then he said blah blah blah, but then he was like, nah, blah. Like, who was writing all this down at the time? Okay, so I'm going back to the blood libel thing. I got off on a different campaign here because I saw the name I'd recognized before. All right, so here the writer states that when Antiochus Epiphanes entered the temple in Jerusalem, he discovered a Greek captive who told him that he was being fattened for sacrifice, because we're talking about blood libel. So when you read about Antiochus, it doesn't mention this. It's not known why he thought this way about them. We have no idea what it was. Oh, come to find out, when you're reading a different part, it tells you that he came upon somebody that told him he was being fattened. And again, 2,000 years ago, we know about this story. Hey, what was happening 2,000 years ago in what is modern day Estonia? We don't know. Modern day Chad. Modern day Egypt. Do you think we have such incredible detail for anywhere else and any time else? What about China? Do we know what was happening at exactly this time in China? And these stories about these characters, like, think about it. These people, of all the people in the world, these people are the ones that history still talks about to this day. And the only reason we talk about it is because of the Hanukkah narrative. It's crazy how my views have just been totally killed. Now we're down to the usual 7. If you're watching, like, share, and sub, man. If you care about this shit, this is the stuff I love to do, because I can't see the comments. I wish I could, but I know the comments are just a bunch of dumb shit. Like, I make all this stuff up. They don't like when facts, when I'm reading the facts, when I'm reading the narrative we're supposed to know or supposed to think of as fact, and pointing out how fucking ridiculous and stupid it is. But hey, I'm gonna keep making some shit up here. Being fanned for sacrifice. Every year, Apion claimed the Jays would sacrifice a Greek and consume his flesh, at the same time swearing eternal hatred toward the Greeks. Apion's claim likely reflects already circulating attitude towards Jays, as similar claims are made by Posidonius and Apollonius Molon in the 1st century. Isn't that weird? Well, wait, but they reflect already circulating attitudes when claims made by Poseidonus in the first century. Well, Antiochus had died long before 1 BC, and if Apion claimed that they would do this every year, swearing eternal hatred toward the Greeks, all that shit, that was long before 1. So this doesn't make any sense. But isn't it interesting how many people were saying these same things? This idea is exampled later in history when Socrates Scholasticus, the 5th century, reported that in a drunken frolic, a group of jays bound a Christian child to a cross in mockery of the death of the Christ and scourged him until he died. That's Socrates. You know how we look at him as this big liar. Look, I'm done. But you know what we're going to talk about tomorrow, don't you? Hopefully the comments will work. I'm going to leave you with, go get your free download. www.the-bilderberg-group.com. It's free. I know you guys don't like when things are free. It's free. All we ask is that you share it with someone. When you click on download, it's going to ask you how much you want to pay. Fucking hey, put 10, 15, 20, $1,000 in there. That'll help out a lot. But you don't have to. Put 0 in and get it for free. All we ask is that you share it with someone. The system is going to tell you that it's an unsecured website and warning, because they don't want you to have it for free. They want you to be scared. There's nothing that's going to happen if you get this download. Right? It's fucking bullshit. But go get the free download. I'm going to leave the link to Hollywoodism. And I'm also going to leave a link to our brand new song dropped yesterday called COVID Sauce. The video for it on Facebook, where you can also see lots of our other music videos. Go check them out. Go share them with your friends. COVID Sauce is fantastic. Fantastic. Probably one of our better songs. Go check it out. Right? The only way we can defeat them is to do what they claim to do. Revolt against this horrible system that exists. These are horrible, horrible fucking people. Oh, look, all my likes are going to disappear too. They love doing that to my videos. Yep.
Give me the phone and go tell him to stop being an asshole. Or he's going to spend the day
You go get your free download. Go watch Hollywoodism. Hollywoodism is the only thing I tell you to watch. Go watch Hollywoodism and go check out the music video. Have a great day. And more importantly than anything else that I say today, pedophiles, fucking kill yourself. Never.